The morning sun cast long shadows across Fort Richardson as soldiers assembled for what would become one of the most memorable demonstrations in the base's history. Among the sea of uniformed personnel stood Marcus Thompson, a 24-year-old administrative clerk whose thick-rimmed glasses and slight frame made him nearly invisible among the hardened soldiers surrounding him. Marcus had spent 3 years at Fort Richardson, buried behind stacks of paperwork and computer screens in the quartermaster's office. While other soldiers trained on obstacle courses and firing ranges, Marcus calculated supply inventories and processed equipment requests. His hands, soft from years of keyboard work, had never gripped anything heavier than a stapler. His colleagues often joked that the most dangerous thing Marcus encountered daily was a paper cut. The base had been buzzing with tension for weeks. General Patricia Morrison had recently taken command, bringing with her a reputation for demanding excellence and weeding out complacency. Word had spread through the barracks that she was conducting surprise evaluations, looking for soldiers who embodied the true spirit of military service beyond their designated roles. On this particular Tuesday morning, General Morrison stood before nearly 300 assembled personnel. Her steel-gray hair was pulled back in a perfect bun, and her uniform displayed ribbons earned through decades of distinguished service. Behind her stood Drill Sergeant Rodriguez, a mountain of a man whose biceps strained against his sleeves and whose voice could shatter windows when raised. "Ladies and gentlemen," General Morrison's voice carried across the formation without need for amplification. "Today we're going to discuss what it means to be a soldier. Not just someone who wears the uniform, but someone who embodies the values we hold sacred." Marcus shifted nervously in the back rows, hoping to remain unnoticed. He had always been uncomfortable with large gatherings, preferring the quiet sanctuary of his office, where numbers made sense and problems had clear solutions. The general's intense gaze seemed to sweep across every face in the crowd, as if she could read the character of each person present. "Courage," the general continued, "isn't just charging into battle. It's stepping forward when others step back. It's taking responsibility when it's easier to blend into the crowd. It's about proving that strength comes not from the size of your muscles, but from the size of your heart and the steel of your determination." Drill Sergeant Rodriguez stepped forward, his massive frame casting an intimidating shadow. "Sir, permission to speak," he barked in his trademark gravelly voice. "Granted, Sergeant." "Ma'am, with respect, these soldiers today are soft. They rely too much on technology, on comfort, on easy solutions. Half of them wouldn't last 5 minutes in real adversity. They talk about courage and honor, but when push comes to shove, they fold like cheap suits." A murmur rippled through the formation. Marcus felt his cheeks burn with embarrassment, knowing that if anyone fit Rodriguez's description, it was him. He spent his days in air-conditioned offices, dealing with supply chains and requisition forms, while others endured grueling physical training. General Morrison nodded slowly. "Sergeant Rodriguez, you raise an interesting point. Perhaps we need a demonstration to separate perception from reality." The general's eyes once again swept across the assembled soldiers. "I'm looking for volunteers. Specifically, I want someone to prove Sergeant Rodriguez wrong. Someone willing to step forward and show that courage isn't determined by appearance or assignment. Someone ready to face a challenge that will test not just their physical capabilities, but their mental toughness and determination." The formation fell silent. 300 soldiers stood motionless, eyes fixed forward, suddenly finding the ground or the sky infinitely interesting. Marcus could hear his own heartbeat thundering in his ears. "The challenge is simple," General Morrison explained. "A one-on-one physical contest with Drill Sergeant Rodriguez. Not a fight, but a test of will, strength, and determination. The volunteer will face 3 challenges designed to test different aspects of character. Pass all 3, and you'll have proven the sergeant's assessment wrong." Marcus watched as several of the base's most physically imposing soldiers suddenly found reasons to study their boots. Tank operators, infantry specialists, and even members of the base's elite security team remained frozen in place. The silence stretched on, becoming more uncomfortable with each passing second. Drill Sergeant Rodriguez smiled, an expression that held no warmth, As I suspected, General. All talk, no action. These soldiers are comfortable giving speeches about courage. But when faced with real challenge, they disappear faster than free pizza in the mess hall. Marcus felt something stirring in his chest, a sensation he couldn't quite identify. For 3 years, he had accepted his role as the invisible clerk, content to remain in the shadows while others received recognition and respect. He thought about his grandfather, who had stormed the beaches of Normandy with nothing but determination and the belief that some things were worth fighting for, regardless of the odds. The general waited another 30 seconds before beginning to turn away. Well, Sergeant Rodriguez, it appears your assessment may be accurate. If no one is willing to step forward and prove otherwise, then perhaps we should, General Morrison. Ma'am. The voice that cut through the morning air was clear but quiet, barely above normal speaking volume. 300 heads turned in unison toward the sound. There, in the back of the formation, stood Marcus Thompson, his right hand raised, glasses sliding slightly down his nose, looking like he might collapse from terror at any moment. General Morrison's eyebrows rose slightly. Yes, soldier? Marcus Thompson, administrative clerk, requesting permission to volunteer, ma'am. His voice wavered slightly, but he managed to keep it steady enough to be understood. A ripple of shocked whispers ran through the formation. Several soldiers actually turned around to get a better look at the mild-mannered clerk, who had apparently lost his mind. Drill Sergeant Rodriguez's expression shifted from smug satisfaction to genuine surprise, then to something that might have been amusement. Soldier Thompson, the general said, walking slowly toward Marcus. Are you certain you understand what you're volunteering for? Marcus swallowed hard, his mouth suddenly dry as desert sand. Yes, ma'am. I understand completely. The general stopped directly in front of him, her piercing blue eyes studying his face intently. And why, exactly, are you stepping forward when soldiers twice your size are remaining silent? Marcus straightened his shoulders as much as his slight frame would allow. Because someone needs to, ma'am, and maybe it's time people stopped assuming they know what someone is capable of based on how they look or what their job title says. General Morrison nodded slowly, a hint of something that might have been approval flickering across her features. Very well, Soldier Thompson. You've got your chance to prove that courage comes in all packages. I hope you're prepared for what comes next. The formation reorganized into a large circle, creating an impromptu arena in the center of the parade ground. Marcus found himself standing across from Drill Sergeant Rodriguez, who looked like he could bench press a small car. The size difference was comical. Rodriguez stood 6 feet 4 inches of pure muscle, while Marcus barely reached 5 feet 8 inches in his boots. All right, Thompson, General Morrison announced, positioning herself where both participants could hear her clearly. 3 challenges. First, physical endurance. Second, mental toughness under pressure. Third, pure determination. You must complete all 3 to prove your point. Fail any one of them, and Sergeant Rodriguez's assessment stands unchallenged. Marcus nodded, trying to project more confidence than he felt. His hands trembled slightly, and he clasped them behind his back to hide the shaking. Around the circle, 300 soldiers watched, with expressions ranging from curiosity to disbelief to outright concern for his well-being. Challenge number 1, the general continued. Endurance. Both participants will hold a plank position until one gives up or collapses. Sergeant Rodriguez, as the challenger being challenged, you may set the terms. Rodriguez grinned, showing teeth that looked like they could chew through steel. Standard plank position, arms extended, perfect form required. First one to break form or quit loses. Should take about 30 seconds with pencil pusher here. The crowd murmured agreement. Most had seen Marcus around the base, always carrying paperwork or hunched over a computer. Nobody had ever seen him in the gym or on the running tracks. This seemed like a foregone conclusion. Take your positions, General Morrison commanded. Both men dropped to the ground, assuming the plank position. Rodriguez looked like a statue carved from granite, his massive frame perfectly aligned. Breathing steady and controlled, Marcus struggled to find his form. his arms shaking as they adjusted to supporting his body weight. "Begin," the general said simply. The first minute passed without incident. Rodriguez maintained his position effortlessly, occasionally glancing over at Marcus with amusement. Marcus's arms were already burning, sweat beginning to bead on his forehead despite the cool morning air. By the second minute, the crowd began to murmur. Nobody had expected Marcus to last this long. His form wasn't perfect, his hips dipped slightly, and his arms trembled, but he held on. Rodriguez's confident expression began to shift toward concentration. The third minute brought real strain. Marcus's entire body screamed in protest. His muscles, unaccustomed to this type of stress, fired distress signals to his brain. Every instinct told him to drop, to end the embarrassment, and return to his comfortable office chair. Instead, he thought about every time someone had dismissed him, every snickered comment about the paper clerk, every assumption that he was weak, simply because his strength wasn't visible. By the fourth minute, something unexpected began to happen. Rodriguez, despite his obvious physical superiority, started to show signs of fatigue. His breathing became slightly labored, and small tremors appeared in his massive frame. Meanwhile, Marcus had found a rhythm. His form improved as he discovered the mental technique of breaking the pain into manageable segments. "This is impossible," someone whispered in the crowd. "The clerk is keeping pace with Rodriguez." By the sixth minute, the murmurs had turned to genuine amazement. Marcus's face was red with exertion, sweat dripping steadily to the ground below him. But his form remained intact. Rodriguez, for the first time, looked genuinely concerned. His superior muscle mass, which should have been an advantage, was now working against him, requiring more energy to maintain position. The eighth minute marked a turning point. Rodriguez's left arm began to shake noticeably, and his breathing became ragged. The crowd, which had been quietly skeptical, now watched in stunned silence. Marcus, drawing on reserves he never knew existed, maintained his position through sheer determination. At 9 minutes and 37 seconds, Rodriguez's form began to deteriorate significantly. His hips sagged, his arms wobbled, and his face contorted with effort. Marcus, sensing the shift in momentum, somehow found the strength to actually improve his form, raising his hips to perfect alignment. "Sergeant Rodriguez," General Morrison said quietly, "your form is breaking down." Rodriguez gritted his teeth, trying to regain proper position, but his muscles had reached their limit. With a grunt of frustration and disbelief, he collapsed to the ground, rolling onto his side and breathing heavily. Marcus held his position for another 10 seconds before General Morrison said, "Challenge 1 complete. Winner, Thompson." The circle erupted in shocked exclamations and scattered applause. Marcus slowly lowered himself to the ground, his arms feeling like rubber, but managed to stand and face his opponent. Rodriguez sat up, looking at Marcus with newfound respect mixed with bewilderment. "How?" Rodriguez asked, genuinely puzzled. "I've been training for 20 years. You work behind a desk." Marcus wiped sweat from his forehead with his sleeve. "Mental training, Sergeant. 3 years of sitting at a desk taught me patience and the ability to endure discomfort for long periods. Plus, I may be small, but I'm efficient. Less mass to support." General Morrison stepped forward. "Impressive reasoning, Thompson. Challenge 2 will test whether that mental toughness extends beyond physical endurance. Sergeant Rodriguez, please set up the pressure test." Rodriguez stood up, still shaking his head in disbelief, and walked to a nearby equipment station. He returned with what appeared to be a complex puzzle box, a military-grade problem-solving device used in advanced training exercises. "This puzzle has 12 interlocking components," Rodriguez explained, his respect for Marcus now evident in his tone. "The average solution time for experienced personnel is 15 minutes under normal conditions. However, to add pressure, you'll solve it while I provide." Encouragement. Marcus examined the device, recognizing it as a 3-dimensional logic puzzle requiring sequential moves in a specific order. The metallic components gleamed in the morning sun, each piece marked with numbers and symbols that would guide the solution process. "What kind of encouragement?" Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Rodriguez smiled. But this time the expression held genuine warmth rather than mockery. Standard drill, instructor encouragement. I'm going to yell, criticize, insult, and generally try to break your concentration. The goal is to see if you can maintain cognitive function under extreme stress. General Morrison checked her watch. You have 20 minutes maximum. Begin when ready. Marcus picked up the puzzle, feeling its weight, and studying the initial configuration. Around him, the circle of soldiers pressed closer, eager to see how the mild-mannered clerk would handle psychological pressure from one of the base's most intimidating drill instructors. Ready, Sergeant, Marcus said quietly, settling into a cross-legged position with the puzzle in his lap. Begin, Rodriguez roared, his voice shifting into the intimidating bellow that had broken countless recruits over the years. Move those soft little fingers, Thompson. My grandmother could solve that faster, and she's been dead for 10 years. Marcus flinched but immediately began manipulating the puzzle components, his mind working to block out the verbal assault while focusing on the logical sequence required. This challenge would test whether his mental toughness could withstand a different kind of pressure than physical endurance. The real test of his character was just beginning. Rodriguez began his psychological assault with the intensity of a freight train. Come on, Thompson. You think those weak little pencil-pushing fingers can handle real work? I've seen faster movement from a sleeping turtle. Marcus's hands trembled as he attempted to rotate the first component of the puzzle. The metal felt cold and unfamiliar compared to computer keyboards and paper files. Rodriguez's voice boomed around him, echoing off nearby buildings and creating an overwhelming wall of sound designed to shatter concentration. Focus on the pattern, Marcus whispered to himself, trying to apply the same methodical thinking he used when reconciling complex inventory spreadsheets. The puzzle required sequential unlocking. Each component had to be moved in a specific order to allow the next piece to rotate freely. Look at him talking to himself, Rodriguez bellowed, pacing around Marcus like a predator circling wounded prey. Can't even handle a little noise without cracking. This is what happens when we let office workers pretend to be soldiers. The crowd watched in fascination as Marcus slowly worked through the first sequence. Despite the verbal barrage, his movements were becoming more deliberate and confident. Years of solving administrative puzzles, untangling budget discrepancies, tracking missing shipments, and resolving supply chain problems had taught him to work through chaos and pressure. You're pathetic, Thompson. My 8-year-old nephew could solve that puzzle blindfolded. You're making the entire United States Army look bad with your incompetence. Marcus completed the first phase of the puzzle, allowing 3 components to move freely. He could feel sweat trickling down his back, but his breathing remained steady. Something Rodriguez didn't understand was that Marcus had spent 3 years dealing with angry commanders, frustrated department heads, and impossible deadlines. Verbal pressure was actually familiar territory. Time check, General Morrison called out. 7 minutes elapsed. Rodriguez increased his intensity, moving closer to Marcus and shouting directly over his shoulder. 7 minutes for the easy part. At this rate, you'll still be sitting here when Christmas comes. Give up now and save yourself the embarrassment. But Marcus had found his rhythm. The puzzle was beginning to reveal its logic, a complex but solvable sequence of rotations and slides that reminded him of the organizational charts he regularly updated. Each piece had a purpose. Each movement created new possibilities, and each solution led to the next challenge. Wait, Rodriguez said suddenly, his voice dropping to normal volume for a moment. How did you? He caught himself and immediately returned to shouting, Don't think you're clever just because you got lucky. The real challenge is just beginning. Marcus had just completed a particularly complex sequence that typically stumped trainees for several minutes. His fingers moved with surprising dexterity, finding the exact pressure points and rotation angles needed to unlock the next phase. The crowd began murmuring as they realized he was making genuine progress. 12 minutes, General Morrison announced. The puzzle was now 2/3 complete. Marcus could see the final configuration taking shape, but the remaining components required the most difficult manipulations. These final moves demanded perfect coordination and timing. A single mistake would lock the entire device and force him to start over. You're slowing down, Thompson, Rodriguez roared, sweat beginning to bead on his own forehead from the intensity of his performance. Choking under pressure like every other pencil-pushing weakling. You don't have what it takes to finish. Marcus paused for just a moment, studying the remaining configuration. In that brief silence, Rodriguez seemed to sense victory and pressed his psychological attack even harder. That's right, freeze up. Show everyone what happens when soft office workers try to do real work. You're proving everything I said about this generation. But Marcus wasn't freezing, he was calculating. The final sequence required 7 precise moves in exact order, with each move depending on the success of the previous one. One error would mean failure, and at this point, there wouldn't be time to start over. 15 minutes, General Morrison called. Marcus began the final sequence. His first move unlocked 2 components simultaneously, causing them to rotate in opposite directions. The crowd collectively held its breath as complex internal mechanisms began shifting into alignment. "Lucky move," Rodriguez shouted, but his voice carried a note of uncertainty now. "Let's see you do it again." Second move, a sliding component that had to be shifted exactly 3 millimeters to allow the next piece to rotate. Marcus's fingers found the precise position, and the component slid smoothly into place with a satisfying click. Third move, the most difficult rotation yet, requiring pressure on 2 different points while twisting a third component. Marcus's hands, strengthened by years of typing and filing, proved surprisingly well suited to the delicate manipulation. "Impossible," someone whispered in the crowd. Fourth move, Marcus was now in completely uncharted territory. Most trainees never reached this phase within the time limit. His concentration was absolute, Rodriguez's shouting fading into background noise as he entered the mental zone he typically reserved for solving complex logistical problems. 17 minutes. Fifth move, a component that had to be lifted, rotated, and locked in sequence while holding 2 other pieces in specific positions. Marcus discovered he could brace one piece with his knee while manipulating the others, using his entire body as a problem-solving tool. Sixth move, Rodriguez had actually stopped shouting, watching in amazement as Marcus approached the final configuration. The entire circle of soldiers leaned forward, straining to see the resolution. 18 minutes, 30 seconds. Marcus took a deep breath and attempted the 7th and final move. The last component required a complex twisting motion while maintaining pressure on 3 different points. His hands moved with steady precision, applying exactly the right amount of force in exactly the right direction. Click. The puzzle opened completely, its components spreading apart in perfect symmetry like a mechanical flower blooming. Marcus held up the solved device, its metallic surfaces catching the morning sunlight. The circle erupted in cheers and applause. Rodriguez stood motionless for a moment, then began clapping slowly, his expression showing genuine admiration. "Outstanding work, Thompson," General Morrison said, taking the puzzle and examining the solution. 18 minutes, 43 seconds. That's the 3rd fastest time recorded at this facility. Marcus stood up shakily, his legs cramped from sitting cross-legged under pressure. "Thank you, ma'am." Rodriguez stepped forward and extended his hand. "I owe you an apology, Thompson. And my respect. That was exceptional problem-solving under extreme pressure." Marcus shook the sergeant's hand, surprised by the warmth in his grip. "No apology necessary, Sergeant. You were doing your job." General Morrison cleared her throat, drawing everyone's attention back to the center. 2 challenges completed successfully. However, we still have the final test, pure determination. Sergeant Rodriguez, what do you propose for the ultimate measure of will? Rodriguez thought for a moment, his expression serious. "General, I think Thompson has already proven his point. He's shown endurance, mental toughness, and problem-solving ability under pressure. I'm not sure what else." "With respect, Sergeant," Marcus interrupted quietly, "I'd like to complete all 3 challenges as agreed." "What did you have in mind for the final test?" The crowd murmured appreciatively at Marcus's insistence on seeing the challenge through to completion. General Morrison nodded approvingly. "Very well, Thompson. The final challenge will be the ultimate test of determination. Are you prepared for whatever Sergeant Rodriguez designs?" Marcus straightened his shoulders, his confidence now genuine rather than forced. "Yes, ma'am. Absolutely." Rodriguez smiled, but this time the expression held both respect and anticipation. The final challenge would determine whether Marcus's success was real or simply an impressive fluke. Rodriguez walked to the edge of the circle, conferring quietly with General Morrison for several minutes. The crowd buzzed with speculation about what final challenge could possibly top the drama they had already witnessed. Marcus used the break to stretch his cramped muscles and try to calm his racing heart. "The final challenge," Rodriguez announced as he returned to the center, "will test the deepest level of determination, the willingness to continue when your body and mind are telling you to quit. When logic says you should give up, and when you have absolutely nothing left, except pure will." He gestured toward the base's obstacle course, visible in the distance across the parade ground. "We're going to race through the full obstacle course, but here's the twist: I'm going to give you a 30-second head start, and if you beat me to the finish line, you win the entire challenge." The crowd fell silent. The obstacle course at Fort Richardson was notorious among military bases, a grueling quarter-mile gauntlet designed to push elite soldiers to their limits. It included rope climbs, wall scaling, crawling under barbed wire, tire runs, and a final sprint that left even the fittest personnel gasping. "Sergeant," Marcus said slowly, "you run that course every day as part of your training. Your personal record is under 4 minutes. I've never even attempted it." "Exactly," Rodriguez replied with a grin that was no longer mocking but genuinely challenging. "That's what makes it a test of pure determination. Logic says you can't win. Your body will tell you to quit. Your mind will present you with 100 rational reasons to give up. The only way you can possibly succeed is through will alone." General Morrison stepped forward. "Thompson, you should understand that this final challenge is genuinely dangerous for someone without proper conditioning. You could injure yourself seriously. There's no shame in acknowledging that you've already proven your point." Marcus looked across at the obstacle course, its wooden barriers and rope structures looking impossibly daunting in the morning light. Every rational part of his mind screamed that this was insane. He was a clerk, not an athlete. Rodriguez was right, this wasn't just improbable, it was nearly impossible. "General Morrison," Marcus said quietly. "Permission to speak freely?" "Granted. Ma'am, I didn't volunteer to prove I could do easy things. I volunteered to prove that determination matters more than appearance. If I back down now, I'm just proving that I know my limitations. If I try and fail, at least I'll fail while moving forward." General Morrison studied his face for a long moment. "Very well. But I want medical personnel standing by. And if I see any sign that you're in genuine distress, I'm calling it off." "Understood, ma'am." The entire formation began moving toward the obstacle course, creating a mobile audience for what promised to be either an inspiring triumph or a spectacular failure. Marcus walked beside Rodriguez, who had become surprisingly supportive. "Thompson," the sergeant said quietly, "I want you to know something. I've been doing this for 20 years, and I've seen every type of soldier you can imagine. What you've shown today, that's rare. Most people never discover what they're really capable of because they never push past their comfort zone." "Thank you, Sergeant. That means a lot." "Don't thank me yet. This course is going to hurt in ways you've never experienced. Your lungs will burn, your muscles will scream, and your brain will beg you to quit. The only way through is to find something deeper than physical strength." They reached the starting line, marked by 2 parallel posts with a banner stretched between them. The course stretched out ahead, a serpentine path of increasingly difficult obstacles culminating in a final sprint to a flagpole in the distance. General Morrison positioned herself at the starting line with a stopwatch. "Thompson, you'll begin on my mark. Rodriguez, you'll follow 30 seconds later. The finish line is the base of the flagpole. First person to touch the pole wins." Marcus approached the starting line, his heart hammering so hard he could hear it in his ears. Around him, 300 soldiers had gathered to witness what most assumed would be a valiant but futile effort. "Any last words before we begin?" Rodriguez asked. Marcus thought for a moment. "Yeah. My grandfather used to tell me that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's action in spite of fear. Today, I learned he was right. "Ready, Thompson?" General Morrison called out. Marcus crouched at the starting line, every muscle in his body tensing with anticipation. The first obstacle, a series of hurdles, loomed 20 yards ahead. Beyond that, rope climbs, wall scaling, crawling sections, and a dozen other challenges that would test every aspect of physical capability. "Go!" Marcus exploded forward with surprising speed, his legs pumping harder than they had since high school track practice. The first set of hurdles approached rapidly, each one requiring him to maintain momentum while clearing barriers designed to slow runners down. He cleared the first hurdle cleanly, then the second. His form wasn't perfect, his technique was amateur compared to trained soldiers, but his determination was absolute. The third hurdle caught his trailing foot, sending him stumbling forward, but he managed to maintain his balance and keep running. Behind him, he could hear General Morrison counting down Rodriguez's start time. 10 seconds. 5 seconds. Go! The rope climb section arrived faster than expected. Marcus grabbed the thick rope, his soft hands immediately protesting against the coarse fibers. He had watched soldiers climb these ropes countless times from his office window, but experiencing it personally was entirely different. His technique was terrible, but he clawed his way upward through sheer determination. Halfway up the 15-foot rope, his arms began to shake uncontrollably. His hands, unaccustomed to this type of grip strength, were already forming blisters. Below him, he could see Rodriguez approaching the hurdles with the fluid efficiency of years of practice. "Don't look down, Thompson," someone shouted from the crowd. "Keep climbing." Marcus forced himself upward, inch by agonizing inch, until finally his hand slapped the bell at the top of the rope. The descent was faster, too fast, and he hit the ground harder than intended, jarring his knees and ankles. The wall scaling section loomed ahead, a 12-foot wooden barrier that required upper body strength Marcus wasn't sure he possessed. Behind him, Rodriguez had reached the rope section and was ascending with mechanical precision, closing the gap with every second. Marcus ran at the wall with everything he had, jumping as high as possible and managing to get his fingertips over the top edge. For a terrifying moment, he hung suspended, his feet scrambling against the wooden surface for purchase. His shoulders burned, his grip began to slip, and logic told him to drop down and admit defeat. Instead, he thought about every time someone had dismissed him, every assumption that he was weak, every moment when he had accepted limitations that others placed on him. With a grunt of effort that surprised him, he hauled himself up and over the wall, landing roughly on the other side. The crawling section stretched ahead 50 yards of mud and barbed wire that had to be navigated on hands and knees. Marcus dropped down and began moving, his uniform immediately soaking up cold mud and water. The barbed wire caught his shirt, his skin, his glasses, but he kept moving forward. Behind him, Rodriguez cleared the wall with easy efficiency and began gaining ground rapidly. The gap was closing, and Marcus still faced the most difficult obstacles ahead. His body was already pushed beyond any previous limits, his breathing ragged, his muscles screaming in protest. But something had changed inside Marcus during this race. For the first time in his life, he understood what it felt like to push past his perceived limitations and discover reserves he never knew existed. The finish line was still distant. Rodriguez was gaining ground, and his body was failing, but his determination had never been stronger. Marcus emerged from the crawling section covered in mud, his glasses askew and his uniform torn in several places. Blood seeped from scratches on his arms where the barbed wire had found exposed skin. His hands were raw from rope burns, his knees ached from hitting the ground hard, and his lungs felt like they were on fire. The tire run section stretched ahead, 20 large tires laid out in a zigzag pattern that required precise footwork and explosive leg strength to navigate quickly. Marcus could hear Rodriguez behind him, moving through the crawling section with the fluid efficiency of someone who had done this thousands of times. Marcus attacked the tires with desperate energy, his feet finding the centers and pushing off as quickly as possible. His form was sloppy, he nearly fell twice and had to catch himself with his hands, but he maintained forward momentum. Each tire felt like a mountain to climb, his legs turning to rubber with each explosive movement. Behind him, Rodriguez emerged from the crawling section and immediately began closing the distance. Even covered in mud, the drill sergeant moved through the obstacles like a machine designed for this exact purpose. His breathing was controlled, his movements efficient, and his pace relentless. The final major obstacle appeared ahead: the cargo net climb. A 20-foot wall of rope netting that had to be scaled, crossed at the top, and descended on the other side. Marcus's hands, already torn and bleeding, would have to grip rope for another grueling climb. He grabbed the netting and began ascending, his technique improving slightly from his experience with the earlier rope climb. But his hands were becoming increasingly unreliable, slipping on the rope fibers slick with his own blood and sweat. 15 feet up, his left hand lost its grip entirely. For a heart-stopping moment, Marcus hung by one hand, his body swaying dangerously away from the net. The crowd below gasped collectively, several soldiers moving forward, as if to catch him. "Hold on, Thompson," someone shouted. "You've got this." Marcus managed to get his left hand back on the net and continued climbing. Behind him, Rodriguez had reached the tire section and was moving through it with systematic precision, gaining ground with every second. At the top of the cargo net, Marcus had to navigate across a narrow beam while 20 feet above the ground. His balance, never great under normal circumstances, was now compromised by exhaustion and the adrenaline surging through his system. Each step across the beam felt like a potential disaster. Halfway across, Marcus glanced back and saw Rodriguez beginning his ascent up the cargo net. The drill sergeant's powerful arms pulled him upward with steady rhythm, closing the gap that Marcus's head start had created. Marcus completed the beam crossing and began descending the far side of the net. His hands, now completely raw, could barely maintain their grip. He half fell, half climbed down the final 10 feet, hitting the ground and immediately breaking into a stumbling run toward the final section. The last challenge was a 100-yard sprint to the flagpole finish line. Under normal circumstances, this would have been the easiest part of the course, but Marcus's legs felt like concrete pillars, his lungs burned with every breath, and his vision was starting to blur from exhaustion. He could hear Rodriguez reaching the top of the cargo net behind him. The drill sergeant would descend quickly and efficiently, then unleash a final sprint that would almost certainly overcome Marcus's dwindling lead. Marcus dug deeper than he had ever dug before. He thought about his grandfather's war stories, about proving that strength came in many forms, about showing that determination could overcome physical limitations. His legs found a rhythm, his breathing steadied slightly, and he began eating up the distance to the flagpole. 50 yards from the finish, Rodriguez hit the ground behind him and immediately launched into his final sprint. Marcus could hear the pounding footsteps growing louder, could sense the powerful runner gaining ground with every stride. 30 yards from the flagpole, Rodriguez was close enough that Marcus could hear his breathing. The drill sergeant's longer legs and superior conditioning were finally overcoming the head start and the younger man's determination. 20 yards. Rodriguez pulled alongside Marcus, both men pushing their bodies beyond normal limits. Marcus's vision tunneled, focusing only on the flagpole ahead. His legs felt like they belonged to someone else, moving through pure willpower rather than muscular control. 10 yards. Rodriguez pulled slightly ahead, his superior training beginning to show. Marcus could feel his lead slipping away, could sense that his miraculous run was about to end just short of victory. 5 yards. Marcus found something he didn't know existed, a final reserve of determination that transcended physical capability. With a final burst of speed that came from somewhere beyond his muscles, he pulled even with Rodriguez. At the flagpole, both men lunged forward simultaneously, their hands reaching for the base of the flagpole at exactly the same moment. They collided, bounced off the pole, and collapsed in a tangled heap on the ground, both completely spent. For several seconds, neither man moved. The crowd ran toward them, General Morrison leading the charge with the medical team close behind. Marcus lay on his back, staring up at the sky, his chest heaving as he struggled to get enough oxygen to his burning lungs. Did we? Who won? Marcus gasped between breaths. Rodriguez, lying beside him, managed a weak laugh. Thompson. That was the most incredible thing I've ever seen. General Morrison knelt beside both men. Gentlemen, From my position, you both hit the flagpole at exactly the same time. I'm calling this a tie." The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Marcus managed to sit up, his vision still slightly blurry but his breathing beginning to stabilize. Rodriguez struggled to his feet and extended a hand to help Marcus up. "Thompson," Rodriguez said, his voice filled with genuine respect, "I owe you more than an apology. You've taught me something today about judging people by their appearance. You've got the heart of a warrior." Marcus accepted the hand and stood on shaky legs. "Sergeant, you pushed me to discover something about myself that I never would have found otherwise. Thank you for the challenge." General Morrison addressed the assembled crowd, her voice carrying clearly across the parade ground. "Ladies and gentlemen, you have witnessed something remarkable today. Soldier Thompson has proven that courage, determination, and strength come in many forms. He has shown that we should never judge a person's capabilities by their job description or physical appearance." She turned to Marcus. "Thompson, you have demonstrated the true spirit of military service, the willingness to step forward when others step back, to push beyond perceived limitations, and to prove that character matters more than circumstances. Your performance today will become part of this base's history." Marcus straightened his torn and muddy uniform as much as possible. "Thank you, General Morrison. But I want everyone to understand something. I'm still the same clerk I was this morning. I still work in the quartermaster's office. I still process supply requests. And I still wear glasses. What changed today wasn't who I am, but what I understood about what I'm capable of." He looked around at the faces surrounding him, soldiers who had watched him prove that assumptions could be wrong, that determination could overcome physical limitations, and that courage existed in unexpected places. "All of us have capabilities we've never tested," Marcus continued. "The difference between discovering them and never knowing they exist is simply the willingness to step forward when stepping back would be easier." Drill Sergeant Rodriguez stepped forward and saluted Marcus, a gesture of respect between equals that brought another round of applause from the crowd. General Morrison nodded approvingly. "Well said, Thompson. And I think it's time we reconsidered how we identify and develop potential in our personnel. Perhaps administrative assignments shouldn't preclude physical training opportunities." As the crowd began to disperse, several soldiers approached Marcus to shake his hand and express their amazement at his performance. The quiet clerk who had been invisible that morning was now the center of attention. But more importantly, he had discovered that he was capable of far more than he had ever imagined. Rodriguez clapped him on the shoulder. "Thompson, how about we make this interesting? I'd like to start training with you regularly. I think we could both learn something from each other." Marcus grinned, still breathing heavily but feeling more alive than he had in years. "Sergeant, I'd be honored. But fair warning, I'm going to need some serious conditioning work before I can keep up with your regular routine." "Don't worry," Rodriguez replied with a smile. "After today, I think I need to reconsider what keeping up actually means. You've got something that can't be taught in a gym, the kind of determination that makes ordinary people do extraordinary things." As Marcus walked back toward the base medical facility to get his cuts and scrapes treated, he reflected on how completely his life had changed in a single morning. He was still the same person, still wore the same glasses, still had the same job, but now he understood that his capabilities were limited only by his willingness to test them. The quiet clerk had stepped forward and discovered that courage comes in many forms, that strength isn't always visible, and that the most powerful force in the world is the determination to prove that assumptions can be wrong. It was a lesson that would reshape not only his own life, but the way everyone on the base thought about potential, judgment, and the true meaning of strength.